Hello, I'm Onyx Asili, a member with Novelties Theater, and today I'm chatting with Dorian Bae, the picture of class with a really great ass. Dorian joins us from the East Coast. They're a part-time performer and a full-time geek. They are currently residing in the District of Columbia, where he delights in the unsettlingly erotic and enjoys blurring the lines between genders and genres. So please welcome Dorian Bae. So you've created this beautiful piece around Neil Gaiman's The Sandman comics. What initially drew you to this bit of media?
What originally drew me to the Sandman comics was just this really beautiful cover art by Dave McKean. He does all of the cover art for the comics, and it's just like very surreal and otherworldly. But what kind of kept me was I grew up as a queer kid in kind of like a very small town in southern Florida, and there was just this very kind of sense of kinship I felt with those comics that I hadn't really encountered yet. So,
Oh, that's a lovely way to be introduced to a work. So if you were trying to describe the Sandman story, and there's a lot of comics here, there's about 75 of them, how would you characterize the work as a whole?
yeah, I would definitely call it a fantasy comic. Um, I think it would really definitely appeal to fans of Gaiman's other work, um, because it's very surreal in a lot of spots. It's very like a lot of his other books. It's very much even though it's like very much a fantasy world, he kind of like draws in a lot of human fears and human concerns and just all sorts of emotion. And the Sandman really is centered around the endless, which are like this eternal family. And I know, you've read it, so I don't have to explain it to you, but for anyone who might be watching and unfamiliar. And the endless are kind of manifestations of human emotions, things humans deal with. Like the very first endless was death, followed by her brother Dream, and so on. So
Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics ran from 1989 to 1996, delighting a generation of goths with its new mythology of metaphysical beings like death, dream, and despair. Among these entities known as the Endless, Desire is explicitly written as androgynous and gender fluid, shifting appearance from masculine to feminine forms to both to neither. In Gaiman's original text, Desire uses it as a pronoun, although the author has mentioned in conversations with non-binary fans that if the story were written today, he would use different terminology. In spite of the comic's clear position on gender, fans expressed outrage at casting a non-binary actor in the role for the upcoming Netflix series. We're clearly in agreement that a non-binary character should be played by a non-binary actor, but the outrage from certain parts of the fan community point to the limits of fan reading. In the case of Desire, these fans have clearly ignored the text in favor of their own interpretation, producing a misreading that defies Henry Jenkins' notion of fan reading as close reading. Whatever certain fanish interpretations may claim, a true close reading of Desire must uphold the character's non-binary nature.
Yeah, so this is a really intense set of stories.
yes.
And there, like I said, there are quite a lot of them. And you're specifically doing a piece on the character Desire.
Yeah.
So why did you specifically choose to explore Desire as a character and not one of the other endless?
Yes. So again, growing up as a queer kid, I didn't actually even know other trans people. I didn't realize I was trans in high school because I had no language for it. But when I read the Sandman comics, Desire is this very androgynous, gender fluid sort of endless, and they actually use the pronouns it for Desire, which I'm I would hope that maybe Gaiman might use they, them nowadays, but I think Desire has no problem with it. So I'll use it for Desire because those are its pronouns. But it just kind of resonated with me because I had never seen um, somebody who looked the way I wanted to look. And I found out later that it was very modeled after Annie Lennox and a lot of other very androgynous presenting entertainers from like the 80s. And I just kind of really saw like a person who had a very feminine face, but a very, masculine attire. And there was something about that, even though I didn't really know what trans was at the time, that I saw that and I was like, that really looks the way, like I would kind of like to look and the way I would kind of like to present. I also think not just the trans aspect, but I think that Desire is a very interesting character because it has a lot of, I think it's more human than the other Endless in a lot of ways, because a lot of the other Endless are very abstract concepts like destruction, death, destiny. But Desire, I think, is something that everyone has felt and everyone has kind of for something, even if it's not a sexual desire, it might be everyone understands that drive. So.
Yeah, I will admit that I also was very struck by Desire's appearance when reading these books, and I love the fact that Desire, in addition to the it pronoun, is often just referred to as sibling because people aren't quite sure like how to characterize this character. So beautiful. And now you did your piece as Desire as a Polesque act.
Yes.
Why did you choose Polesque? What did you feel like that would bring that maybe just a standard on the floor burlesque piece wouldn't bring, or like just a standard dance piece wouldn't bring?
Yeah. So I love being in the air as often as I can, and I love pole. I think this act, I actually have performed a variant of this act when I was very first starting, like baby burlesque performer. And that was just a standard burlesque act. But I feel like pole is like this really unique combination of strength and sensuality. And I think that really kind of, not that strength is gendered, but I feel like I was able to do some kind of like strength and sensual things with Desire that kind of got at its like gender blend.
So one of the other interesting things about the Sandman arc is that it was originally published in like the early to mid 90s. So I believe the first one came out in 89 and then they published until 96. So 75 books. But now we're looking at something that's over a decade old. Do you feel like this work is still really relevant today? Do you feel like it's really something that still calls to people?
I definitely think so. I think there are some aspects of it that were products of their time. Like, for example, like I said, I'm not sure if Gaiman would still use it to refer to Desire, because I think as an author, he is kind of sensitive to how that can be dehumanizing. And I'm not sure at this point if he would choose to use it pronouns with someone who looks androgynous, because that's so often used as a slur. But I think that there are a lot of queer themes that run throughout the Sandman comics, which is why I think a lot of queer folk like those comics. And I think that there's still a lot of universal appeal to the story because, as you pointed out, like it is a very intense story, and it's, like spans worlds and time, and it's just very much an epic.
Yeah. So this is a work that, as you said, just it spans worlds, it spans time, it's very broad. Do you have a favorite like line or passage or moment from it that you're just like, every time you think about it, you're like, that is the moment for me. That's the capstone.
Yes, and it's a very small thing, just kind of like a one-off bit of the comics. But there's a part where a man who has lived since basically the Ice Age ends up dying, and he meets death um, after he dies in the modern era, and he asks her, like, did I do a good job? Like, was my life fulfilling, sort of thing, basically. Like, did I win, essentially? And she just looks at him, and Death in the comics is just like this very kind, sweet, woman who comes to us all. And she just looks at him and says, "You get what anybody gets. You get a lifetime." And that's a line that's always stuck with me. It's like, like we don't know the number of our days. We just have a set time on Earth. And who knows what comes after? We can try to guess. But at the end, there will be death waiting for us. And all we have is, the lives we live. And all we can do is just do our best.
So before we actually take a look at your piece, is there anything that you would like to say about this piece? Like why it spoke to you, what made you want to do it? Just anything that you're like, I feel like it would be a great thing for the audience to know, because we don't always get to do that when we're watching works of art. We don't always get to understand the creator's mindset. Is there something that you would really like your audience to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So the song I'm dancing to is called Osculeter Mi, and it is actually my husband singing it. So it's special to me for that reason. But it's also a song that's based on it's an old Renaissance hymn about the Song of Songs, which is, the sexiest book of the Bible. And part of why I chose it is because I think the endless kind of have this sacred and profane aspect to them. And that's kind of what I was going for, is like embracing how kind of exploring how religion tries to constrain desire, and how as humans, we always try to find these systems to constrain desire, whether within us or outside of ourselves. But how that's never exactly possible. Like I feel like we can control ourselves, we can control our desires, but we also ultimately have to accept some of them and work with them and kind of live with a lot of them. So I think that was kind of what I was trying to say.
Oh, excellent. Well, let's take a moment to see your beautiful piece, and we'll continue our conversation afterwards.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you for sharing your beautiful artwork with us. That was wonderful. Let's talk about a little more about Sandman and sort of your experience with it. Obviously, this time you chose to explore desire, but if you were to explore another theme or character of Sandman, who or what would you want to focus on?
I think so. This is definitely massive spoilers for the comic. So, but in the conclusion of the Sandman series, Dream actually dies and is reincarnated as Daniel, who is the new Dream. And I think that would be a really fun character to explore because he's lived a big part of his life as a human, and he's suddenly coming into like these like powers that are like beyond the gods, like the endless are more powerful than gods. And just kind of exploring that, like that sudden rush of like going from basically no power to like, I can do anything. And also kind of the family dynamics of like brand new to a family that's been around literally forever. So.
Excellent. So also because Sandman is such a large scale story, if you were to do like a full adaptation, you could play any character and then you could invite the cast of your dreams to fill all these other roles. Who do you think you would like to work with for a project like that? If you could just go and like someone was like, I will give you all the money you need, you do whatever you like, what do you think that would look like for you?
Oh gosh. I know that I had this question ahead of time, but I honestly still don't know because if I could do anything, I would be spoiled for choice. But there is actually an adaptation of the Sandman coming out pretty soon. So I'm honestly most excited. I'd be more excited to see that than to see my own twist on it. Because to me, I think I really love seeing how other people interpret the things I love. So fingers crossed, but I'm, cautiously optimistic for the adaptation.
Yeah, I know that there has been talk of other adaptations in the past and they've not always worked out, but
stuck in development hell. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you feeling really hopeful about this one? Do you think it's gonna fly?
I think so. I think the time is right now for it because there's been a lot of I think there's way more acceptance for comic movies telling like serious stories. And there was just, like the recent success of WandaVision and a lot of other superhero shows. It isn't really a superhero show, even though it was in the, in that universe. But I think now also a lot of Gaiman's work has been successfully adapted for the screen. So I think with like the success of Good Omens, people are willing to take a risk on it. But it's gonna be a task because, as you pointed out, like it's a huge body of work. So.
So one last question. What do you think Gaiman would think of your adaptation of Desire if he has a chance to ever see this piece?
God, I'd hope he would like it. I'm really not sure. I always kind of got the feeling that part of the reason why Gaiman used it pronouns for Desire was kind of a distancing mechanism. And I also found it interesting that I think there is a lot of Gaiman in Morpheus, the lead character of Sandman. And Desire is one of Dream's antagonists in the series. So I'm just really not sure what he'd think of it, but I hope he'd like it. And I would hope he would think it was a unique twist.
Oh. Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your beautiful artwork with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're really looking forward to seeing more work from you. So definitely keep us posted on future endeavors. And we will continue to follow you on Instagram and Facebook.
Well, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to meet you.
It was lovely meeting you and speaking with you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Ekphrasis, a production of Novelties Theatre. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to make a tax-deductible donation through the link in the video description. And don't forget to like and subscribe below so you don't miss our next episode on Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar with Maggie McMuffin and her clown alter ego Bonnie Bell Blue.